Chapter 6. In Spite of Handicaps. This is my fourth Christmas in bed, and it doesn't look as though I'll ever get out. My arthritis has gotten so bad that I've had to give up my painting. Rheumatic fever has left me with a bad heart, and the doctor says I will never work again. My eyesight has grown so poor I must give up my studies. Polio has left me a hopeless cripple. I have lost my leg, and I can't see any reason for going on. This war wound has ruined my life and my hopes. It is useless to try any longer. My job demands a first-rater. I am only a second-rater. It is impossible to make the adjustment. I am utterly discouraged. Alcohol has gotten the best of me. I can't fight it any longer. I started out with great possibilities, but fear and self-consciousness have ruined my chances. I have been denied the normal family relationships. My life is barren and empty. In the world, said Jesus, ye shall have tribulations, but be of good cheer. I have overcome the world. In the world you will have handicaps, but be of good cheer. There is a way out of them. If it is true that misery loves company, we should find consolation in the fact that handicaps are the common lot of all mankind. Everyone has a drawback of some kind. Some are visible to the world, others are known only to the individual. How did you get where you are today? If you are dissatisfied with your present status and realize how far you are from where you should be, you are quite likely to say that you are where you are because of your handicaps. But if you can see growth in yourself, if you have achieved to the extent that you find satisfaction in living despite your awareness of an ideal yet to be reached, you will probably be proud to say that you are accomplishing your purpose in spite of handicaps. It is not the handicap that determines our success or failure in life. It is the way we meet it. It is our reaction to it. The real problem is not the deformity itself, but the way in which the deformity affects the total personality. Franklin Roosevelt arrived at the highest office in the land in spite of the dread disease of polio. Lionel Barrymore, the incomparable movie actor, continued his acting in a wheelchair when he became so crippled with arthritis that he could no longer stand or walk. Call the role of the noble handicapped who have won fame and position of power in spite of the deficiencies, and you will find that in every case the secret of their victory was in their minds. They not only refused to submit to their handicaps, but they also learned how to use them. Did epilepsy stop Socrates, Richelieu, or Napoleon? Did crippling infirmity stop Robert Louis Stevenson? Did blindness stop Homer, Milton, Fanny Crosby? Did a club foot stop Sir Walter Scott or Lord Byron? Did deafness stop Beethoven? Did defeat after defeat stop Balzac? Did paralysis stop Louis Pasteur? Did rebuff stop Schumann Heinz? Did a bad heart and crippled limb stop Charles Steinmetz? Did the loss of a lung stop Roger Babson? Did physical infirmity stop Admiral Boyd? Did repeated failures and criticism stop Walt Disney? Go on and name hundreds more. What does it take to stop a man? Nothing but his admission of defeat. Defeat and victory are both in the mind. No man can be defeated until he accepts defeat. In Mexico there is a famous statue by Jesus Garcia called In Spite Of. It is a monument to the dauntless who have succeeded in spite of their handicaps. When the sculptor was well on his way with the statue, he lost his right hand. To most sculptors, this would have been a supreme tragedy, but not to Garcia. Undaunted by the calamity that had befallen him, he learned to carve with his left hand and finished the statue. There is much wisdom in the statement, when fate throws a dagger at you, there are two ways to catch it, either by the blade or by the handle. The law of averages said that there is just so much trouble in the world and that every man must take his share. But that isn't true, you say. There are some people who have more trouble than others. And more often than not you say, but I have more trouble than others. That point of view is an optical illusion. The reason you think that some people have more trouble than others is that you see them at the critical periods in their lives and not as a whole. The reason you think that you have more trouble than others is that in your times of distress you tend to forget your blessings. It is not uncommon to hear people say, why did this have to happen to me? The answer is that you are part of the race consciousness. In the race consciousness, there is no security or immunity from hazards. Life is filled with them. You can start out from your home in the morning and be struck down by a car on the street. A deadly germ can get into your blood and all the skill of medical science be unable to avert the end. You can fall on the stairs in your home and become a lifelong cripple. Human life is filled with danger, jeopardy, misfortune, and peril. It has always been this way, and it will continue to be so until we learn how to live above the raised consciousness, until we accept the presence of God. In Jesus Christ, you are above the law and not subject to it. So long as we are in the world, it behooves us to learn how to meet the world. There is a story in the Gospel of St. Luke of a woman who had suffered from a proclivity in her back for 18 years. The physician does not go into detail about the woman's trouble, except to say that she was bowed together and could not stand up straight. But he does say that she had the spirit of infirmity. What does that mean? It means that she had let her deformity distort her spirit. There was an emotional factor in her trouble that was even worse than the handicap itself. This emotional factor could have been self-consciousness, self-pity, or any one of the dozen other things. But whatever it was, it had brought her great mental anguish and pain. Here is a clear case of the psychosomatic sickness. Jesus called the woman to him and said unto her, Woman, thou art loosed from thine infirmity. And he laid his hands on her, and immediately she was made straight and glorified God. Now note the method of healing that Jesus employed in this case. First he loosed the spirit of infirmity. Then her body was made straight. Why didn't Jesus start with the woman's body? Because the source of her trouble was in her soul. Do you see what destructive emotional conflicts can do to the body? Listen to the men of science. One doctor says, I have treated many a patient with a broken leg when the more demanding need was to heal a broken heart. Another says that full half the people that crowd his offices have nothing wrong with them physically. What does the Mayo Clinic mean when it reports that of 15,000 ulcer patients, 80% were found not to have any physical cause for ulcer of the stomach? They mean that 8 persons out of 10 were suffering from emotional disturbances. The great Dr. Paul Du Bois said, religious faith is the best preventative against the maladies of the soul, mind, and body, and it is the most powerful medicine we have ever discovered for curing them. Be careful, however, what religious faith you choose. Make sure that it is a sane, scientific, practical, and down-to-earth. Why does the author sound this warning? Because of the countless victims of irrational, nerve-shattering, misleading, and spurious religions whom he has found in mental institutions. Is it any wonder that psychiatrists will not allow ministers to discuss religion with their patients in these hospitals? How much better for humanity it would be if clergymen and their doctrines were screened by state boards of intelligent clerics before they were allowed to preach. One with a back bowed together does not need to be threatened with being toasted over the flames of imaginary hell. He needs something constructive that will transform and fortify him from within. If the representatives of the church do not teach mankind how to meet the vicissitudes of human existence, who will? Rational religion says, make your handicap into an asset. Do something with it. Make something out of it. Irrational religion says, your handicap is a punishment from God. You have offended him, and he is wreaking vengeance upon you, and you must suffer until you expiate your sin. But how does the exponent of the latter point of view reconcile his view with the promise, I, Jesus, am come that ye might have life and have it more abundantly? Or with the statement of St. Paul, my strength is made perfect in weakness. I take pleasure in infirmity, for Christ's sake, for when I am weak, then I am strong. And with his inquiry, if ye then, being evil, know how to give good gifts unto their children, how much more shall your Father which is in heaven give good things to them that ask him? Since God is all life and all love, how can life and love create anything unlike itself? How can it inflict punishment or disease? The truth is that disease has only the power over us which we give it. Which is better, to make something out of our infirmities or to fold up and die under them? Whom are you worshiping, the vindictive, tribal God of Moses, or the triumphant, loving God of Jesus? The first brings captivity and defeat, the second brings freedom and success. Sidney Powell tells a story of determination worth reading. When Fred Stone crashed while piloting his airplane and sustained injuries that almost seemed to exhaust the catalog, compound fracture of left ankle, compound fracture of the shin, fracture of the right thigh, fracture of 2 ribs on one side, 3 on the other side, dislocation of the shoulder, scalp injury, requiring 20 stitches, broken jaw, tongue bitten almost in 2. The doctor told him he might possibly walk again someday, but to appear on the stage in such parts as he had been playing during his whole previous career was impossible. But as a boy 9 years old, he had mastered the high wire. He had showed a dogged determination to refuse to give up a thing until he had mastered it. He said that was probably just the natural desire to try myself out against things, but it is why I came to be an acrobat. And it was the reason why 3 years after the doctors had prophesied that he could never appear again as an acrobat, he was back on the stage in a new show. Dauntless, Christ-conscious men are like airplanes. They rise not with the wind but against it. Norman Peale, in telling the story of Harold Russell, gives us a sentence to remember. Who is Harold Russell? He is a famous actor. Before the war, he was a clerk in a meat market. In the Army, he made quite a little progress. But one day, he picked up some kind of explosive and lost both hands. After a while, they fixed him up with artificial hands, which they called hooks, the same kind of hooks that they have in the meat market. Had he not had a normal mind, this would have filled him with gloom. But Russell said to himself, "It is not what a man has lost that matters, but what he has left." It seemed only a matter of months when Harold Russell became one of the motion picture stars in The Best Years of Our Lives. You may forget this story in years to come, but it is important that you remember the truth that it contains. It is not what a man has lost that matters, but what he has left. The outcome of every handicap depends upon your attitude toward it. If it gets you, you are lost. If you get it, you are saved. "How long halt ye been between 2 opinions?" asked Elijah. Ask yourself, what am I going to do about my handicap? What am I going to do to make of it? Am I going to make it an ally over a hindrance or an asset or a liability? The place to decide this issue is in the mind and the soul. If there is no handicap in the soul, there will be none in the body. A handicap may be mental, physical, or emotional. It may be a poor memory, a twisted limb, or an uncontrollable temper. To some people, a handicap is an excuse for quitting, for hiding, for laying down or giving up. To others, it is a challenge to conquer, to turn the clouds inside out, to make their difficulties serve them. No one can be blamed for this handicap, but he should be blamed for not making something out of it. One does not overcome handicaps by resignation and despair, but by seeding the blessings in them. The Swedish people have a saying, "Blessed is he who sees a dawn in every midnight." The dawn is there, but it awaits recognition. There are 2 kinds of handicapped people in the world, the outgoing and the in-driving. The outgoing personality turns the service towards others. The in-driving turns towards self. The first leads to freedom, the second leads to neurosis. Self-centeredness is an enemy to health. The egocentric person is usually sick. Does that sound like preaching? Then listen to William James, a philosopher who said, "The deepest drive of human nature is to be appreciated." If you are self-centered, you haven't time to think of anyone but yourself. The cure is to let yourself alone, be outgoing, get interested in other people whether you feel like it or not. They too need encouragement and appreciation. Give yourself and spend yourself. It won't cost you anything, and it will do you a world of good. Self-concern breeds emotional illness. An old story gives the secret of overcoming self-centeredness as knowing and using the fact that everybody's lonesome. Jesus said, "He that loses his life shall find it." In effect, he was saying, lose the self, and you will lose your ills. While Alexander Bell was trying to build a hearing aid for his wife's deafness, he invented the telephone. When Abraham Lincoln lost himself in the cause of emancipation and the relief of human suffering, he immortalized himself. Hugh McNair Callers tells the story of 2 northern doctors who went to the southern village to die. One was tuberculosis, the other arthritic. The author aroused the interest of each in the other, and the man who would not take a fighting chance for himself took it for the fellow physician. Each brought his best skill to bear on the other's case, while the result that both lived and became loved and influential residents of the town. Kohler concludes, each of them, in private conversation with me, always took credit for having helped the other to live those 19 extra years of life. Each in public and in private gave the other credit for having cured him. Neither one ever suspected that in his self-forgetting effort to help the other, each had cured himself. The metaphysician says, face your liability. Make something of it. How? By being bigger than your disability. When you know the nature of your handicap, you will know how to meet it. The people who never rise above their handicaps are the people who try to conceal them or to use them for little personal ends. We refer, of course, to the coward, the sympathy seeker, and those who use their handicaps as an excuse for laziness. To face your handicap, on the other hand, is half the battle, Dr. William Osler said. We are not likely to die of a disease which we know we have and which we are watching, but rather of a disease that takes hold unexpectedly because we are not prepared. Most of us are very honest with ourselves and our abilities, but are inclined to be very dishonest about our limitations. It is important to analyze our handicaps and to see them as they are. In fact, it is only as we recognize and analyze our handicaps that we can discover what can be done with them. Ask yourself these questions. 1. What is the nature of my handicap? 2. Is there anything about it that can be altered? 3. Is there anything about it that cannot be changed? When you find the factors that cannot be changed, resolve to accept them. Accept them with your whole being and promise yourself that you will never fight nor resist them again. This is the first step in turning your liability into an asset and the first step in removing the tension from your problem. The next step is to surrender what still remains unalterable to God, who, as the psalmists say, daily beareth our burden. When man lets go, God takes hold. Do you see the picture clearly? Before you can use your handicap and make something of it, you must first recognize it. You change what you recognize as being changeable within your present understanding. What you have not the power to see as changeable, you turn over to God, knowing that your vision and your faith will grow to encompass any difficulty. But how does one change the alterable factors in a situation? By substitution and compensation. The stream of life is just as irresistible and undefeatable as a stream of water. If it is obstructed in one place, it will find an outlet in another place. So it should be with you and with your physical, mental, and emotional bottlenecks. If you are hindered in one direction, you can work in another. If you are disabled in one ability, you can develop another. I know a woman who compensated for a terrible facial deformity by developing a brilliant mind. In fact, her lectures were so scintillating, stimulating, and transforming that the listener never thought of her face. She determined to carry on in spite of her deformity, and became one of the most popular and sought-after women in this country. Don't give in to your handicap, says this intrepid soul, but use it. Though everything may be against you, and though every way may be closed except up, God opens a way on your level where there is no seeming way. No barrier is impassable if you are determined to win. Glenn Cunningham's story bears this out. When Glenn Cunningham was 7 years old, he was so badly burned in a schoolhouse fire in Kansas that he lay helpless for weeks, his legs swathed in bandages. His right leg became crooked and shortened by 2.5 inches, pulled up at the knee by scar tissue. There were no toes on his left foot, and the arch had collapsed. The doctors said he would never be able to walk again, but he determined not only to walk, but to run as well. He massaged his legs, and the family pulled them, although it caused him a great deal of pain. Soon he began to walk, at first with crutches and at age 11 without them. It hurt him to walk, but he found that when he ran, he forgot the pain, and everywhere he went, he ran. Thus he developed his legs so that in the junior year in high school, he made the track team. And in 1934 at Princeton's Palmer Stadium, Cunningham, representing the University of Kansas, beat Bill Bontner of Princeton for 40 yards and established the world's indoor mile record. What is your handicap? You are the only one who can answer this question. What is the technique for dealing with it? There are 3 ways in which you can overcome them. 1. You can transmute it through substitution and compensation by turning your energies into another direction. 2. You can eliminate it by facing yourself as you are and accepting the challenge which the handicap brings. 3. You can accept it by changing your thought about it, refusing to feel sorry for yourself, refusing to rebel, refusing to be negative in your attitude toward it. Many rules have been given for overcoming handicaps, but they can all be summed up in the injunction: establish the right attitude toward life. There must not only be an analysis of the problem, but also a grim determination to do something about it. Bemoaning our fate and dwelling in the thought of how wonderful things might have been if no solution. We must be realistic and intelligent. If there is a grace that is sufficient for us, we must find it and put it to work. Let the handicapped say to himself, am I the only one who is to make the best of the second best? Is my infirmity unique? The answer is certain and comforting. The surest thing in the world, in addition to death and taxes, is that everyone has a handicap. Yes, even those who are not aware of them. Did Joseph want to be sold into slavery, betrayed, lied about, and imprisoned? No. But he made something out of it. He turned the tables on his brothers. He changed an injury into a blessing. Did Paul want a thorn in the flesh? You know by his prayers that he did not. What then did he say about it? My strength is made perfect in weakness. I will make something of it. When I am weak, I am strong. Do you see what he meant by the positive attitude? History is made by the people who accept the challenge of the impossible and the incurable and drive through to the victory in spite of everything. Dr. Fosdick tells this pertinent story. Do you hear the shouting in the assembly hall of a great Midwestern university? It is graduation day, and there has never been such cheering, not even on a football victory, as greeted by a crippled boy carried in the arms of his companions across the platform. 4 years before, that boy had answered, present at the first roll call of his class. Stand up, said the professor. I should like to, sir, but I have not been able to stand since I was 4 years old. But by being what he was in a difficult situation, that boy made such an impression at the university that when his companions carried him up for his diploma, the great assemblage broke into such cheer as that college generation had not heard before. There are basic principles which you can learn and apply. Principles can help you emerge victorious in spite of handicaps. 1. Do not compromise with truth. Do you remember the words of the 3 young men who were about to be thrown into a fiery furnace? The God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the burning furnace and from our power. But if not, know ye that we will not bow down before the golden image. Note the words, but if not. Our faith in God is not based upon the healing of our physical infirmities, the straightening of bent backs, or the restoration of withered hands, although God can do that too. God did not save Jesus from the cross, but through the cross. He saved the world. And our faith is strong enough and big enough, God will strengthen the back, but if not, we shall go straight on. There's a spiritual order in divine healing. To miss that order is to miss the blessing. Since human afflictions are more mental than physical, the proper approach to healing is through the mind. What we need first is freedom from the power that the handicapped holds over us. Our faith must keep intact. The answer to prayer is secondary, but faith is primary. You can't trust God wholly because of what he does for you. You must trust him in spite of the things you ask for that are not yet objectified for you on the material plane. 2. Do not compare yourself with other people. If you say, handicapped as I am, I can never be like John Smith, you're playing a losing game. The wonderful thing about creation is that you are not supposed to be like anyone else. Your only responsibility is to meet your handicap as superbly as you can. Say to yourself, I, John Jones, do here and now accept my handicap and with the help of God resolve to make something out of it. 3. Cultivate contentment. St. Paul said, I have learned in whatsoever state I am, therewith to be content. He had learned how to meet things as they came. Many people are overburdened mentally and physically because they try to meet their troubles in battalions. In most instances, difficulties arise one by one and should be met in a single file, just as the bank teller receives the customer in front of his window. It requires skill to do so, but developing the skill pays large dividend. 4. Let go of the past. Yesterday died last night. Today it was born this morning. The Eskimos believe that they begin a new life with each new morning. Sleep for them is death. Waking is resurrection. If we could all get this realization, it would not only break your bondage to the past, but would keep us eternally new and young. Age is a belief in time, the weight of years. To live outside of time in the now would mean continuous rejuvenation. Does that sound fantastic? Consider the statement that no one is more than a year old physically. If the mind does not grow old, the mind of a man of 80 is the same age as that of a boy 12. Where then do age and wrinkles come from? From our belief in time. If we could live and think in the present, the body would daily be renewed. Perhaps that is why St. Paul told us to be transformed by the renewing of the mind. When the mind is renewed, the body is automatically transformed. 5. Magnify your assets. The reason many handicapped people go down in defeat is that they take a negative view of life. They allow their deformities to hold a spotlight in conscience instead of giving it to their assets. Perhaps these people do not realize that despondency is just as much of a disease as appendicitis. When the despondent person needs is to find the good and encouraging thing in the situation and to magnify those. Jesus said, "Let your light shine." Let the good come to the forefront of consciousness and crowd the bad out. 6. Surrender your handicap to God. If you keep your handicap bottled up within you, it will affect your whole life. If you try to deal with it yourself, you will make it worse. The only satisfactory way to handle it is to get it out of your hands and into God's hands. Your power plus God's power can make something out of it. Are you brooding over your infirmity? Then you are trying to handle it by yourself. You can hand it back to God by thanking Him for the good that He is bringing out of it. Remember that miracles happen in a thankful heart. 7. Be willing to change your plan. When things do not turn out the way you planned, be willing to try something else. Your success in life depends not upon one plan, but upon your resiliency and flexibility in meeting changes. A friend of mine believed that he should have been a lawyer, but reverses made it necessary for him to quit school, and he turned to another field. He became one of the most successful boys' leaders in the country. It is a mistake to hold your plans too tenaciously. Flexibility is just as important to me as it is to trees. The rigid man is easily broken. The flexible man always comes back. Change is the law of growth. 8. Don't trouble trouble. There's an old jingle which says, "Don't trouble trouble until trouble troubles you." In other words, do not anticipate trouble. Because you have had one heart attack is no reason for living in the expectation of having another. You can easily bring on another, however, by anticipating in your thought. People perpetuate their ills from one day to another by anticipation. If you provide for failure, you will fail. If you provide for your handicap to get the upper hand, it will get the upper hand. If you provide a constructive channel for it, it will cease to be a liability. St. Paul said, "But put ye on the Lord Jesus Christ, and make no provision for the flesh to fulfill the lust thereof." 9. Don't pity yourself. Most handicapped persons are tempted to feel sorry for themselves. Self-pity leads to introversion, and introversion leads to despair. Self-pity is an emotional poison. It not only infects the entire personality, but it delays healing. It is a wise person who keeps his mental and emotional wounds clean. 10. Do not syndicate your troubles. The first and most important thing in dealing with troubles is to unseat the pain by getting the trouble out in the open. Trouble is like a boil. When you lance it by discussing it with an understanding friend, you let out the poison. You whittle it down in size, and there is great relief. There is a vast difference, however, between sharing your trouble and syndicating it. If you retail your trouble to everyone you meet, you increase the infection and your trouble grows. Syndicating your troubles is the quickest way to repel your friends. 11. Don't resist your trouble. If you fight your trouble, it will fight back. Like any other difficulty, trouble grows through attention. The more you fight, the more tense you become. The proper way to handle it is to agree with it. "Agree with thine adversary quickly," said Jesus. Shift the center of gravity. Forget yourself by doing some constructive work for others. When you fight handicaps, when you think only of your own deliverance, you go down instead of up, backward instead of forward. The way to keep the healing power of God flowing through you is to remove tension and strain from your mind. 12. Find something interesting to do. The best medicine for introversion is interesting work. Work is one of the greatest healing agencies in life. Work is more than a blessing, it is a restorative. Without work, man has no incentive or design for living. The busy man has no time for self-pity, for disappointment, or for regrets. There are important things on his mind he must be up and doing, growing, planning, climbing, exploring, selling, and creating. It is a wonderful thing to greet each new day with the realization that you have an important job to do. It doesn't matter whether the job is large or small. Do as much or as little as you can, and be happy and thankful for it. "But I am confined to my bed," someone said. So what? There are many useful and interesting occupations that you can pursue from your bed. Let the bedridden one say, "I may be shut in, but I am not shut out." 13. If you must die, die quietly. Since everyone is going to live forever, we might just as well begin now. Jesus said this life is life external, and he did not mean disease, decrepitude, or disintegration. He meant health, youth, wholeness, and perfection. Adjust yourself to the endless side of life, and you will arrest stagnation and inertia. Eternality is written in your inward parts, but you must practice it. Life always responds to what you see and feel. Open yourself to this life within. Begin to live. Growing old gracefully is an impossibility. Grace and wrinkles do not go together, metaphysically interpreted. Growing old gracefully means to die easily and perceptively without pain or disease. In the divine order, death is a translation and not a fight. Are you old, tired, and full of misery? Then you are not living life to the full. John Doe, your personality is not your life. God is. Know it, realize it, think it, live it, and practice it 24 hours a day. Think of the life force within you as a boundless river forever flowing. Sir Thomas Buxton said, "The longer I live, the more I am certain that the great difference between men, between the great and insignificant, is energy, invincible determination, an honest purpose once fixed, and then death or victory. This quality will do anything in the world, and no talent, no circumstance, will make a two-legged creature a man without it. Accepting this power on his own, we shall rejoice with the psalmist. The lines are fallen unto me in pleasant places. Yea, I have a goodly heritage." End of chapter.